Hello, everyone. At 7 years old, Patricia McCormick was full of life and curiosity, like most 7-year-olds, right? I mean, that's the way you were at 7. On a family vacation in Mexico City, she was enthralled with a bullfighter who lost his shoe in the mud in the arena, but kept fighting. There was something about that moment that was magical to her, and she birthed this love for bullfighting at 7 years old. When she returned home, she took her tattered blanket and stood in front of her mirror in her room, and she fought bulls, throwing her blanket one direction and her body the other direction. The biggest bulls she could ever imagine, snorting at her and glaring at her, and she loved it. All her childhood was spent enjoying that great imagination of hers. Well, time passed quickly, as it often does, and she was off to UT to attend UT in Austin to study opera. That was her chosen field, to study opera. However, she didn't know that she lacked musical talent. How many of you done something before that didn't really fit? So she ended up transferring to UT El Paso to study art. Turns out she did have an affinity for art. And in El Paso, you know what happened? She reconnected with that love for bullfighting. She could just wander right across the border to Juarez and watch a bullfight. And every fight was a thrill for her. She spent every waking hour watching the bullfighters, studying the bulls, reading about matadors, practicing in her dorm room at this point with her dad's World War I blanket. Patricia ends up choosing a career as filled with drama and passion and death as the operas that she wanted to sing. She became a matador, the first American bullfighter, not to mention the first woman in a machismo-saturated bull ring. Patricia premiered as a guest bullfighter in Juarez in 1951. The bull trampled her twice, but the crowd loved her, and the judges gave her this rating of superior. I don't know what you have to do to get a rating that's not superior, but the bull trampled her twice. So from this failure, her career was launched. Her first professional fight was 4 months later, when she realized, this is going to be broadcast. This appearance is going to be broadcast. I should probably call my parents and let them know I quit college to fight bulls. They didn't even know. So you know, if you're a parent, how that went down. Her parents were appalled. They rushed out to El Paso. They met with the president of the university. By the time Patricia found her mom on campus, her mom was crying and saying, how could you? How could you? And Patricia already had a manager and 9 contracts for bullfights. So basically she said, you can't beat that. She received top billing in stadiums from Mexico to South America. She insisted on following the same rules as men. Now, there were women that were fighting bulls at the time, but they stayed on horseback. So it was a different kind of sport. So she followed the same rules of men. Most of the women who were on horseback were fighting much smaller animals, much smaller bulls, but she kept all the same rules. She stood on her feet, man. She fought from the ground, pivoted when she needed to, and thousands of fans went wild at the sight of her. She became an international phenomenon. She was featured in Sports Illustrated, Time magazine, Look magazine. They all profiled her. In fact, Sports Illustrated called her the greatest woman bullfighter who ever lived. A bullfighting critic, Rafael Solana, once called her the most courageous woman he'd ever seen. And so for more than a decade, she experienced the bellowing of the crowd, the stirring of the band music, the dust in her nostrils, the half-ton bulls charging at her swirling red cloth, horns low and deadly. 1,000 times she faced a bull set on killing her, and only 6 times was she ever gored. In 1954, by the way, that's pretty good. 1,000 times, only 6 times gored. 1954, while fighting her second bull of the day, she turned away from the bull to bow to the crowd, which was a very typical traditional part of the performance. And as she was turning back, the bull charged. And he gored her from behind, so he impaled her on his horns. He lifted her up, and he traversed around the arena. Her mentor, Alejandro, jumped into the ring without the aid of a cape, without the aid of anything, pulled her off the horns, and laid her down in the arena. The gruesome stomach and pelvic injury was so bad that a priest came out of the stands into the arena and administered last rites over her mangled body. A doctor there wanted to transport her to the United States simply so she could die in her own country. And so for days she floated in and out of consciousness, but every time she was conscious, she would raise her little fist as much as she could and she would say, "I will fight again." 6 months later, 6 months of recovery, 6 months later, she fights for the first time again. She enters the arena and fights for several more years. In early 1960s, she gets out of the ring complaining that the bulls have just gotten too small. But one of the well-renowned toreros, Carlos Aruza, said of her, she fights the largest animals. She has more skill than you can imagine. Her only defect is that she's a woman. Turns out the mid-20th century, even the bull ring had a glass ceiling. She performed on the same bill as some of the arena's most accomplished men. She faced the largest bulls at these dusty rings around Mexico and Venezuela, yet she never advanced from this apprentice stage. See, a sponsor was required to become a full-fledged matador, and no male matador would ever sponsor a woman. So today I say to Patricia, you have sponsored us all, right? Given us a platform to face down the things that charge us, inspired courage within us to become more than we have been expected to be, and left us challenged to stand bravely and face what comes at us. So, Patricia, thank you for leaving us a legacy. You've cleared a path for tenacious, powerful, determined, resilient women to follow their design and leave their mark on the world just like you did. So everybody say, Ole, right? We've taken time in March, just on Wednesdays at 1, to create a sacred space where we tell the stories of women who've gone before us. It's Women's History Month, and there are some legacies that have gone before us. I'm Michele Gooch with Life by Design. Join me next Wednesday at 1. And if you are looking for a collective, a group of women who are supporting, encouraging, providing kind of a mentor in your inbox, check out plaidforwomen.com. Plaidforwomen.com. See you next week.